There are two major testing companies in the U.S. that are vying for your test dollars. Thankfully, the vast majority of the campuses and colleges across the nation will accept either one. There's no right or wrong. So the SAT is more prevalent out here. That's why our students are taking the PSAT. But the ACT, which we'll mention in just a moment, is an equally fine option. Okay? For the SAT, the magic word is changes. So, for right now, there is a current SAT that's been around for a while. If you came to our PSAT results night last January, I think it was, we mentioned at that time, your student's class, this junior class across the nation, has a unique opportunity. They can choose to take the current SAT, which may align more with the way they've been educated for the most of their educational career, and take it in the December or January dates. January is the last test date that the current SAT will be offered, because then it goes to the redesign. So after that point, the redesign test becomes the SAT, and any testing beyond that date is what your student will take that version. Okay? So they'll have an opportunity to take two versions if they would like. Thankfully, the colleges, again, because the SAT is morphing, if your student takes both versions, they will accept each one equally and evaluate them accordingly. Okay?
Will they super score you too?
Depends on the college. Question was, do they super score? That's an advanced question, you should know.
I didn't know if they would on two different types of tests, two different versions.
With these two versions, they are not going to mix and match the results from those.
Okay.
They're different enough.
Okay.
Okay? But what super score simply means is if you submit more than one test result on a test, for the UCs, for example, they will use only your best total score in one sitting. What is it? We'll take that one. Others will super score, simply meaning if you give us multiple, we'll say, give me your best critical reading, give me your best math over here, give me your best writing over here. We'll put those together and call it your best score. Cal States do that. Private colleges tend to do that. The redesign test promises to be aligned with the Common Core. Your students who took the PSAT yesterday, that was their foray into what that looks like. Okay, so you could ask your student, what was it like? Okay. Big thing is they're eliminating the guessing penalty that's always been there in the SAT, so that's kind of a cool thing. With the ACT, it has 5 different components. They bill themselves as a more straightforward achievement type of test, whereas the SAT has always been an aptitude test. That is a critical thinking test. They believe that their items have always been more aligned with the general high school curriculum. Okay? You can see that the writing component for them has always been optional. For the current SAT, it is not optional. For the new redesigned SAT starting in March, it will be optional. But as our little notation indicates, right now the UCs say we want the writing. Okay? So if anybody takes the ACT and plans to go to the UC, don't make the writing optional, take it. If your student is not sure what their final group of colleges are by the time they're taking their tests, it is best to go ahead and err on the conservative side and say, I'm going to test with writing, because if the college doesn't need it or use it, okay. But if they need it, it's there. Third type of tests are called the subject tests. Kate alluded to those earlier in talking about the UCs. Private colleges are big on these too, especially the more selective types. There are 16 different individual subject tests in those 5 subject areas. Already mentioned how they are optional for the UCs, but for some majors they are required. Think engineering, right? Typically, if they ask for subject tests, they want 2 in 2 different subject areas. And it's helpful for the student, depending on where they're kind of gravitating to in a college major and career interest. If I'm STEMmy, then I better do a math and a science. If I'm more in the humanities language things, well then I'm going to focus more on history, English, and world languages if they offer tests in there. Okay? You can take up to 3 subject tests in one SAT setting. So their test dates mirror the regular SAT test dates. Okay? Not every subject test is offered every test date. I believe the SAT is offered 7 times over the academic calendar. Okay, so lots of opportunities. But they're shorter tests, roughly an hour each. So it's about the same amount of time as sitting for the SAT itself. Okay? And then again, as Ms. Dindy had mentioned before, it's really helpful for a student to take a subject test right after they've finished or right as they're finishing a test that prepares them for the subject and the questions on that test. So concrete example, our students who are in pre-calculus honors, if they're in it this year, take the subject test this June, right? Because I'll be finishing that course in June. And it has the level of math that the math level 2 is requiring, pre-calculus honors. For our subject tests, what we have found historically is that either very rigorous, very last, so to speak, honors classes right before it morphs into AP, or AP courses are really what a student needs to be successful on subject tests, unless they do some test prep, which you can do for individual subject tests, and we'll chat about that in a moment. So if I'm in AP US History this year, if I'm in AP English Language this year, if I'm in AP Bio this year, all of those are great subjects to consider taking a subject test in. Okay? And again, same thing. If I'm not quite sure that the colleges I end up applying to require it, I know it takes time, but it's not the kind of thing you sit and you test prep for because you're taking the course. That's preparing for the test. And having it is better than not having it at some point. Often asked, SAT or ACT? That's the answer. There is no right answer. Again, it's that fit word, okay? So right now, based on the current SAT, it's been a question of the speed that's required to be successful on the ACT versus what is considered a more difficult test of the SAT. People can say that the SAT, as it's currently constituted, have tricky questions, multi-step questions, so they have you do the, here's a math problem, and instead of just simply asking you to solve for X, they say, solve for 4 times X. And of course, one of the wrong answers that you can choose from is X. And it's like, really? Okay. So students who are fast readers, fast information processors, often might do well then on the ACT and find that a better fit. For the SAT, it's the students who like to problem solve, puzzle, like to be thoughtful, like to be challenged by a question that I don't know the answer to right off the bat. So that seems to work better for that kind of student. And I know that's general because realistically the best way to find an answer is do a practice test on both. So if your student took the PSAT, that's one practice test, and I'm going to get a score. At the ACT website and other sites that we give you on our testing page under counseling, there are other places where you can do an ACT practice test. Just make sure your student takes it under more or less regular test conditions. Okay, a little bubble sheet which you can download and then do the test. Make sure it's timed. Stop when you're really supposed to stop, that whole thing. And then they give you a scoring key and you can just make sure you score your own. So when should your student take the tests? Well, when they're ready. But certainly get that first one under their belt by the end of their junior year. Okay? That gives them the fall of their senior year to retake if they choose, to try to improve their score. Talk about readiness. Make sure that math is through level, math is Algebra 2. That they keep in mind what their time demands are at the time they plan to take the test. Okay, am I going to be too distracted to be able to really focus and give my best effort? Same thing with AP exams that come in May or finals in June. Am I going to be able to handle that and take the test? And last but not least, they really do want to make time for test prep. Test prep does not mean you have to pay $1 bazillion to have your student prep for testing. Okay? There's a whole host of options out there. College Board has partnered with Khan Academy, so there is a free SAT for the new one, the redesigned one, free SAT prep class that your student can follow online. Okay? And there are other free resources there too, and again, we'll shill for the fact that we have lots of this information on our testing page under counseling at our homepage. How often should I take the test? Well, a realistic number is 3. Because you'll either take it once or twice in your junior year and either once or twice in the senior year. December is the last test date that many colleges will accept from a senior. Okay, so that's only a few months in the fall, right? So realistically for a student, getting 3 in is a good number. Okay? You could get more in if you just wanted to just say, okay, I'm signing up this month, I'm signing up next month, I'm signing up next month, I'm signing up this one and this one. But what happens is you're not going to get your results back typically fast enough to do anything different, which is the next point. Well, first and foremost, it's typical for students to take the test more than once. It is definitely the case that students improve their score the second time they take it. Okay? Just practice makes perfect, right? How much they might improve really depends on what did I do between the first time I took it and the next time I take it. So when the question is, what did I do differently? It's how did I profit from my experience on the first test taking? What were my results? Where did it show my relative strengths and weaknesses? Do I need to fine-tune how I review and prep before I go into the next? This is something that came from one of the Harvard admission reps. This whole question of how many times should kids take it. They just basically said, we start frowning on it when they start taking it a bunch. We don't expect it to become an extracurricular activity. Okay? It also sends a poor message. I'm just going over and over and over until I finally get to that very last highest score I could possibly. It's like they want you to use your time more productively. Okay? And realistically, if you take it 3 times, you're probably hovering in after 3 times on what your true score is anyways. After 3, you're not going to typically see just this huge jump. Do colleges know how many times a student takes the test? It's yes if your student submits all the scores. And some colleges require that. And there's no harm in that because of this last item. Remember I said earlier, they always grant you the grace of your best score no matter when it occurred, no matter which test, if you took the 2 different tests it occurred on. And so, yes, in that sense. But you do get to choose. It's your information. So you can select which test or tests you want to take. But it doesn't harm you to submit them all.